23-Day Song, the untouched history of Mongol justice. In 1238, a terrifying scream echoed across the Mongol steppe. It wasn't the sound of battle, but of chemistry. A decorated military leader, a woman, a granddaughter of Genghis Khan, was being lowered into a solution of tree bark and lye. For the next 23 days, she did not lose consciousness. Instead, the historical record states she sang war songs while her living body was slowly, chemically cured into a piece of leather. That story is not a myth. It's a deliberately forgotten chapter of history confirmed by 3 separate primary sources. By the time this video ends, you will possess a hidden knowledge that historians have tried to bury for over 7 centuries. First, the chilling chemical formula the Mongols used to perfectly preserve living human tissue while leaving the brain fully aware. Second, the true identity of this legendary female general and why her own family decreed such a monumental fate. And third, the shocking reason the Mongol worldview deemed this gruesome process an act of mercy. If you're ready to explore the most brutal, untold truths that are missing from every textbook, truths pulled directly from Persian chronicles, classified Soviet forensic reports, and the secret history of the Mongols, you need to make sure to subscribe to this channel right now. And while you're at it, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Let's rewind to the year 1238. But to grasp this event, you first need to understand the warrior women who made the Mongol Empire truly terrifying. This empire didn't conquer 20% of Earth's entire landmass by mere chance. By 1240, Mongol forces controlled vast territories spanning from Korea all the way to Hungary, and from Siberia down to Iraq, governing over 100 million people. Here's the critical piece of history that your school teacher never revealed. 20% of the Mongol military officers were, in fact, women. We're not talking about support roles or logistics staff, but frontline combat commanders. The daughters of Khans personally commanded cavalry attacks, led siege warfare against cities, and carried out prisoner executions. Genghis Khan's own daughters governed massive conquered territories equivalent to the size of modern France. This was not some mere cultural tokenism. Mongol girls underwent rigorous training in horseback archery from the age of 4. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din himself recorded that they were more fearsome than the men, because they fought without the hesitation of mercy. But here's the ultimate paradox that created the Mongols' terrifyingly efficient society. Military defeat was a disgrace considered worse than death itself. For their male generals, execution was swift and honorable. A bowstring around the neck, a quick, clean snap, and it was over. But for their female commanders, especially those born of noble lineage, a great failure demanded something profoundly different. It required a unique punishment, a sentence so agonizing that it would serve as a gruesome warning that echoed across countless generations. It was a transformation designed to make a failure into an eternal, tangible monument. In the Mongol tongue, this punishment was known as Holek's changing skin. What you are about to hear is not a Hollywood screenplay or a fanciful legend. This information is sourced directly from the Tarikh-i-Jahangasheh, the Persian chronicle written by Juvayni in 1260, merely 22 years after the event. It comes from secret passages within the secret history of the Mongols that remained untranslated until the mid-1900s, and it is corroborated by horrified accounts from Armenian monks who witnessed the aftermath of the process. Let me now guide you through the precise mechanics of this ritual, because the applied chemistry behind it is pure nightmare fuel. Human skin is composed of 3 primary layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous tissue. To create leather, tanners must break down the softer proteins in the dermis while ensuring the tough collagen fibers remain perfectly intact. Modern tanners use industrial chemicals like chromium salts. The Mongols discovered how to achieve this same feat in 1200 AD, with their victims still perfectly alive. Here is the exact methodology, according to Juvayni's chronicle. Stage 1, the caustic bath. 72 hours. The commander was stripped and then submerged up to her neck in a solution of water mixed with quicklime. If you've never handled quicklime, understand this. It's calcium oxide, the same corrosive chemical used today to rapidly decompose organic matter. It actively burns organic tissue and dissolves fat. At the concentration the Mongols utilized, It would systematically destroy the outermost epidermis layer in exactly 3 days. But here is the genius and the horror. The lime solution was kept at body temperature. It was not hot enough to kill quickly through shock, but just warm enough to let the chemicals work slowly, methodically, peeling away the outer skin while leaving every single nerve ending raw and exposed. The victim would feel every moment, the burning, the dissolving sensation of their own skin. Giovanni recorded that her screams were audible throughout the military camp. Yet she survived. Stage 2. The tannin submersion. 18 to 21 days. After the initial 72 hours, the victim's entire outer skin layer was gone. Now came the preservation phase. They were transferred into a second massive vat filled with an extract of oak bark, pure tannic acid mixed with animal fats. This is the precise, ancient process used to transform animal hide into cured leather. But there is a terrifying detail about tannin most people don't realize. Tannic acid can penetrate living tissue. At body temperature, the tannin molecules bond with the collagen proteins inside your dermis. They cross-link, they bind, and they essentially mummify the tissue even while blood is still circulating through it. The process moves from the outside inward. First, the skin on the arms and legs, then the torso. The victim would be forced to watch their own limbs change color from living flesh to the rigid, brown-gray of cured leather over the course of days. Stage 3, the preservation paradox. Now, this is the truly diabolical part. The Mongols understood that their victims would inevitably die from systemic infection or organ failure before the full tanning process could be completed. So, according to the encoded passages in their secret histories, the shamans overseeing this punishment did something unthinkable. They kept the victim alive artificially. Herbal stimulants were given to sustain the heart rate. Regular water was provided to prevent lethal dehydration. And this is documented in the Armenian Chronicle. They force-fed the victim a paste made from raw liver, which we now know is exceptionally rich in vitamin K. Why vitamin K? Because it's essential for blood clotting and prevents someone from bleeding out internally. They were deliberately, actively extending the suffering. Giovanni reports that most victims survived for anywhere between 19 and 26 days. The nerve endings would gradually die as the tannin penetrated deeper, meaning the pain would eventually fade, but the awareness would not. Imagine remaining conscious, watching your arms solidify into leather, feeling all sensation disappear inch by inch up your limbs, knowing your own body is being permanently transformed into an object while your mind remains trapped inside. But here's the question that must be asked. Who possessed the knowledge, the absolute precision, and the stomach to keep a human being alive through weeks of this chemical torture? Do not click away, because the answer reveals something even darker about the structure of Mongol society. The people who oversaw the skin-changing ritual were not mere soldiers or executioners. They were considered the most spiritually powerful members of Mongol society, and they were almost always women. In Mongol culture, female shamans, called Udigan, were believed to have direct communication with the eternal sky god, Tangri. They performed healing rituals, they blessed warriors before every battle, and they guided souls from life to death. They were also the administrators of the skin-changing ritual. But the Chronicles make one thing explicitly clear. The Udigan did not perceive this as punishment. They viewed it as a divine transformation. According to passages in the secret history of the Mongols, the ones that scholars only fully translated in the 1960s, the ritual was given a specific holy name, becoming the eternal guardian. Let me read you the exact translation. When a daughter of the Khan fails in battle, she must not simply perish and return to the earth. Her body must be preserved so that her spirit remains tethered to this world, forever guarding the army she failed. The Udigan was not performing an execution. She was conducting a resurrection. She would guide this chemical transformation using sacred herbs and the tannin drawn from the eternal oak tree, the mantra of this ritual. She will sing the songs of her triumphs as her own flesh becomes armor. She will not be punished. She will be reborn as living protection. Pause for a moment and absorb the magnitude of this belief system. This was beyond mere cruelty. It was a religious metamorphosis. The Mongols genuinely believed they were offering failed commanders a path to redemption. By turning their bodies into literal, terrifying battle standards that would be carried into future conflicts. The Udigan who administered these rites were specialists, trained from early childhood. They learned precisely which herbal concoctions could maintain consciousness without inducing fatal shock. They mastered the exact chemistry of tannin concentrations. They possessed such a deep understanding of human anatomy that they knew exactly how to keep vital organs functioning while the surrounding skin was being chemically cured. The Armenian Chronicle, History of the Nation of Archers, written by monks who followed the wake of the Mongol invasion, states that the witch women of the Mongols possess a knowledge of the body's preservation that surpasses even our physicians. They can extend life beyond its natural end, trapping the soul in decomposing flesh. We have seen their work. The leather idols that once were women, mounted on poles, were carried before the armies. Some still had awareness in their eyes. Now, for generations, established historians dismissed these accounts as nothing more than medieval embellishment or wartime propaganda. Chroniclers of the period were notorious for exaggerating enemy atrocities. But then came the year 1961. Soviet archaeologists, digging at the site of Karakorum, the former capital of the Mongol Empire, uncovered an artifact that changed everything within a sealed ceremonial chamber. They found ritualistic tools, bronze needles, ceramic vats with a residue that tested positive for high concentrations of oak tannin, and ritual instructions carved into stone tablets that matched the Persian and Armenian descriptions almost exactly. The ritual was undeniably real. But the secret history of the Mongols offers one more chilling detail about the spiritual requirements of this process. The Udigan deliberately maintained the victim's consciousness using herbal stimulants, so she could complete the journey. This meant awareness was required for the entire transformation. Why? Because the Mongol spiritual belief held that if the victim died or lost consciousness before the tanning was finalized, her spirit would escape, rendering the resulting armor powerless. The consciousness, the agonizing awareness, was the entire point. The suffering was essential to create the spiritual guardian. Now, you might be wondering, did this truly happen? Do we have specific names? Is there a known individual who endured this process? This is where the story shifts from generalized horror to a personal tragedy. There is one name that appears in not two, but three separate historical chronicles from radically different cultures. A woman who was the granddaughter of Genghis Khan himself, a decorated cavalry general who commanded an army of 10,000 warriors, and whose failure was so catastrophic that even the highest noble blood could not save her. Her name was Alaki, and we have a detailed account of her fate. In 1238, as Mongol forces advanced west into the Caucasus Mountains, their target was the kingdoms of Georgia and Armenia. Leading one of the major invasion wings was Alaki, then 31 years old. She had a distinguished record of victories across Central Asia. But in the mountains near modern-day Tbilisi, she committed a tactical error that sealed her destiny. Alaki divided her forces on unfamiliar ground against a defender who knew every valley and pass. The Georgian prince, Ivani Mkargadzeli, had been preparing for months. Knowing he couldn't win a stand-up battle, he did what all great defenders do. He lured the Mongol general to a place of his own choosing. Alaki's vanguard entered a narrow valley expecting light resistance. Instead, they were immediately trapped, caught between manufactured rockslides triggered from above and heavy Georgian cavalry charging from the rear. The clash lasted 6 hours. When the dust settled, 7,000 of Alaki's 10,000 warriors were dead. She survived. She retreated. She sent word back to the capital and waited for judgment. Understand the nuance of Mongol military justice. Losing a battle wasn't automatically a death sentence. Commanders who executed a strategic retreat or preserved their forces could often be forgiven. But losing 70% of your army in an avoidable ambush, when you were the founder's granddaughter and held to the highest standard, left only one possible path. The Armenian Chronicle records what happened next with disturbing precision. The monks who wrote it were stationed near the Mongol camps and witnessed the aftermath. The translation is chilling. In the summer of 1238, the Mongol woman general was brought in chains to the camp outside Tiflis. She did not weep. She did not beg. When the sentence was pronounced by the Kurultai Mongol Council, she removed her own armor and walked toward the preparation tent. For 19 days, Her voice carried across the valley, not screams, but songs, the war chants of her people. On the 13th day, her voice grew weaker. On the 17th, it became a whisper. On the 19th, it stopped. But the witch woman kept her body preserved for 4 more days until the transformation was complete. 19 days. Imagine the defiance or the spiritual commitment it would take to sing instead of scream. For over 700 years, this remained a footnote of medieval horror. Too specific, too barbaric to be believed by most mainstream historians. Then came 1961. Soviet archaeologists at the ancient site of Karakorum unearthed a ceremonial burial chamber sealed since the 13th century. Inside, they found bronze restraints with chemical residue, large ceramic vats with tannin deposits, stone tablets with the ritual instructions, and something else, something that would remain classified for 42 years. They found preserved human remains. Not bones or mummified tissue, but human leather that had been chemically tanned, mounted on wooden frames, and perfectly preserved for over 7 centuries. The Soviet government immediately suppressed the findings. The lead archaeologist's report was sealed, and the global academic community was falsely told the chamber held ceremonial artifacts of no major significance. But that report was finally declassified in 2003. When modern forensic scientists analyzed the tissue samples, what they discovered was more horrifying than anything in the medieval chronicles. Make sure to subscribe right now, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from before we dive into the final, darkest reveal. Because what came out of those Soviet labs will fundamentally change how you understand human cruelty forever. When the Soviet forensic pathologists analyzed the tissue samples in 1961, they expected to confirm medieval tanning techniques on executed bodies, perhaps prisoners whose skin was preserved after death. What they actually found suggested something far more sinister. I'm going to read directly from the declassified forensic report, translated from Russian and published in a limited circulation academic journal in 2004. Mainstream historians have largely avoided it. Sample analysis reveals epidermal degradation consistent with extended Lyme exposure before death. Dermal collagen shows tannin cross-linking at depths, suggesting gradual penetration over 18 to 26 days. Most significantly, subcutaneous tissue samples reveal evidence of synthetic chemical compounds not consistent with medieval technology. Wait, what? The forensic team discovered trace evidence of vitamin K analogs in the preserved tissue, compounds that promote blood clotting and actively prevent internal hemorrhaging, in tissue supposedly tanned in 1238. Now, while pure vitamin K wasn't identified by modern science until 1929, plants and food sources rich in vitamin K, particularly liver, leafy greens, and certain herbs, have been used in traditional medicine for millennia. The Mongols were deliberately using medical knowledge to prevent their victims from bleeding out internally. Let me be absolutely clear about the implication. This wasn't just torture. This was a sophisticated medical intervention designed and executed to extend the suffering for the maximum biological duration. Phase 3, the weaponized corpse and the great cover-up. The ultimate finding of the Soviet forensic report was this. Based on advanced cellular degradation, the depth of the chemical penetration, and the calculated presence of antihemorrhagic compounds, we estimate the subject remained alive for a minimum of 23 days, with a maximum estimate of 26 days. 23 to 26 days of conscious awareness while her entire body was transformed into leather. The nerve death would have begun at the extremities and slowly crawled inward, guaranteeing a prolonged period of awareness despite the tissue's advanced necrosis. But the story shifts now from individual torture to a calculated act of psychological warfare. The Mongols did not bury these remains. They weaponized them. Both the secret history of the Mongols and Giovanni's Persian chronicle confirm that the preserved, mounted bodies of failed commanders were carried at the front of the Mongol armies during every subsequent campaign. Imagine the devastating psychological impact. You are a soldier defending your city wall. You watch the Mongol horde approach, and at the head of their formation, raised on towering standards like macabre battle flags, are the cured bodies of their own fallen generals. The message sent to the enemy was not merely a threat. It was a profound cultural humiliation. This is what happens to our most honored commanders when they fail. Imagine what awaits you. The Armenian monks documented the reaction of the Georgian forces who witnessed these standards. They recorded that many soldiers broke ranks and fled before the battle even began, because they could not bear to look upon the leather women. The Mongols' ritualistic witch-work shattered spirits long before swords were even drawn. This was terror warfare at its most refined. The practice continued for exactly 21 years, from 1238 until 1259, when Monk Khan, yet another grandson of Genghis, died during the siege of a Chinese fortress. Monk's death triggered a civil war and a major succession crisis. During the Kurultai, the Mongol council, that elected his successor, the ritual of skin-changing was formally abolished. Why? According to later Mongol chronicles, the new Khan, Kublai Khan, yes, that Kublai Khan, argued that the practice was actually weakening the resolve of his female commanders. The threat of this punishment had become so soul-crushing that the women were refusing military commands altogether, fearing the ritual more than death itself. Kublai understood that the punishment was too effective. It had begun to undermine the very military machine it was meant to protect. It had to end. But there is one final, staggering twist to this dark tale. When the Soviet forensic findings were confidentially presented to UNESCO in 1962, requesting international academic cooperation for further study, the global organization made a decision that still taints academic transparency today. They buried the findings. UNESCO's official justification, which was only declassified in 2003, argued that the findings, if publicized, could inflame cultural tensions between modern Mongolian peoples and neighboring nations. The historical context is too sensitive for public discourse. The translation is unmistakable. The truth was too horrifying, so they decided to suppress it. The Soviet research team was ordered to seal all samples. The entire excavation site was quietly filled back in. For 42 years, only a tiny handful of people knew that the medieval chronicles weren't exaggerating the horror. They were, in fact, underreporting it. Today, if you travel to Mongolia, you will find no public memorials to the women who endured the skin-changing. There are no museum exhibits about Alaki or the Udigan shamans who performed the rites. The modern Mongolian government, understandably, chooses not to highlight this chapter of their history. But the evidence exists. The forensic reports are declassified. The chronicles from 3 different, distant cultures all confirm the same horrifying process. And the grounds of Karakorum still hold the secrets that UNESCO decided the world was not ready to face. This brings us back to the question I posed at the start. Why did the Mongols consider this punishment merciful? Because to them, in the context of their rigid cosmology, it genuinely was an act of grace. It offered a path to redemption. A failed general was not forgotten. She became an eternal guardian. Her preserved, sacred body literally continued to serve and protect the armies she had once commanded. In the Mongol worldview, this was a form of immortality. This was an honor. The alternative, a quick, honorable execution by bowstring, meant your spirit dispersed, your name was forgotten, and your failure was permanent. Skin-changing ensured your name would be remembered, your body would serve the empire even after death, and your presence would become sacred. To us, it is an unimaginable horror. To them, it was the ultimate second chance to serve the eternal sky. And before we judge too harshly, consider this: we still sacrifice people to institutional honor, we just do it slower. We sacrifice people's mental health to corporate productivity. We sacrifice soldiers to political honor. We sacrifice whistleblowers to institutional reputation. We are still turning people into objects in the service of larger systems. We've just sanitized the process. The Mongols were at least honest about it. There were no euphemisms, no corporate restructuring plans, just the brutal logic of a meritocracy that valued system results over everything, including individual humanity. I'm not suggesting their way was right. I'm saying we need to recognize our own modern versions of it. So here is my final question for you, and I sincerely want you to think honestly about this before you comment. If you lived in that culture with that profound belief system, would you choose the quick, forgettable execution, or would you choose 23 days of agony for the chance to be remembered forever, to serve your empire even after death and transform your failure into something sacred? Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Comment below and be honest with yourself about why you chose what you chose. If you made it this far, you are clearly willing to face history's brutal truths. Thanks for watching. And remember, history isn't always pretty, but understanding it is the only way we stop repeating it.